18. Consumerism. Within a few years after World War II, a study by David Reisman, Nathan Glazer, and Roel Denny, The Lonely Crowd, a study of the changing American character, 1953, described the change taking place in men. Society was becoming consumption-centered rather than production-centered. People were less and less conscience-directed and more group-directed. The feelings and demands of the group were replacing God for many. Life magazine, in a double issue on December the 28th, 1959, devoted about 200 pages to the good life, which was defined in terms of two things: play and love, the elixir. Men who had once lived to work were now increasingly working to play. Knowledge was becoming consumer-oriented also, and university courses were directed to students as consumers. Shortly thereafter, the universities exploded with protests, riots, and revolutionary disruptions. The role of professional agitators was a real one. Marxists were clearly involved in the campus agitations. The Marxist minority, however, was able to function and to use large numbers of students because they were consumption-oriented and, as consumers, they were eager to protest the quality and the character of the products, their education. The demonstrations destroyed property. In some instances, occupied buildings were vandalized, and the protesters urinated and defecated everywhere in order to register their gleeful protest. Now, a consumer or consumption-oriented society has a very obvious character: infantilism. The infant is the total consumer. A baby is fed, clothed, looked after, and a baby is not penalized for urinating and defecating at will. The same is at times true of the elderly with the onset of senility. They again become total consumers. In the elderly, this is seen as a very sad condition. In the infant, there is an expectation of maturity. The startling fact of the second half of the 20th century is that, under a variety of flattering names, infantilism has become a social goal, though not with the loss of urinary and rectal controls. A successful advertisement of the 1980s offers a work-free life. A man who at the age of 36 retired to live off his investments offered a work-free life to his subscribers. The goal of too many people is to become a consumer. Consumerism rests on the premise that the world revolves around the consumer, and that consumerism is basic to life and economics. In such thinking, sovereignty has shifted from God to man, but more specifically, to man as consumer. In this framework, the consumer is king. He is a godlike person in that his wants, appetites, and tastes are determinative of society. The meaning of freedom then comes to mean consumer freedom. The freedom of the producer is curtailed, controlled, or eradicated because the producer is now becoming a necessary evil, whereas the consumer is the king of society. His tastes and demands are legitimate because consumption is increasingly the area of legitimacy. As we have seen, there is congruity of trends within a social movement or a society, unless someone or some group sets itself religiously in opposition to that order. It should not surprise us, therefore, to see that marriage has changed. From the perspective of Scripture, marriage is a religious matter. It is a union of two persons to establish a family under God. The marriage ceremonies of the churches commonly stress its covenantal character. The bride and groom do vow and covenant to live together under God and His requirements. Such marriages are not consumer-oriented, they are God-centered, and, over the centuries, the Church has regulated marriage and has stressed its theological meaning. The family is the God-created order for mankind, and Western civilization has been family-centered, not state-centered until recently. As Zimmerman and Cervantes noted, from birth to grave, there is scarcely any great action of consequence that can be performed by a person, even in our free society, that is not guided and coloured by family relations. The individual in his family meaning is the real unit in society. Detached or non-familistically guided individuals exist only in imagination or in discoloured surroundings such as prostitution, crime, or Skid Row. According to Lawrence Stone, the secularization of society began after 1660. The root of the problem which ensued had their origin in the rise of antinomianism, so that, both within the Church and outside of it, sexual license was increasingly advocated. Stone noted the occasional antinomianism which plagued the sects. For example, in 1751, John Wesley had to move against a Methodist preacher who argued that a believer had a right to all women. In the second half of the 20th century, this antinomianism combined with consumerism to create a new mentality. Marriage was now viewed as a consumer's opportunity, not as a godly covenant. Scientific, quote, experts, end quote, sexologists replaced pastors and priests as authorities on marriage. Scientific technique replaced biblical faith as the key factor in marriage. Marriage manuals were now sex manuals, and one so greatly centred life on the sexual act as to become unconsciously a work for laughter, not counsel. Dr. Van de Velde, MD, insisted, but the husband must exercise the greatest gentleness, the most delicate reverence. Reverence was transferred from the church to the marriage bed. But this reverence could not last long when both parties were consumers, nor did it. In 1927, Ernest Groves began to teach a course on marriage education at the University of North Carolina. In about 50 years, such courses had shifted from marriage to sex education to conform with consumerism. In 1952, Ernest Burgess reported that research findings had replaced moral and religious sanctions on sexual behaviour. Religion and morality were left out of the courses of instruction on sex, on all levels of schooling, as Bailey commented. One of the earliest manifestations of the movement warned against applying abstract formulations to individual students' problems. Counselling was, ideally, to be non-judgmental, non-prescriptive, based on insight-giving rather than advice-giving. If sovereignty rests in the people, it follows that the consumer is king. Therefore, no religious or moral law can be binding on this sovereign consumer. Thus, safe sex and the use of condoms can be advocated to avoid the AIDS disease, but not morality, because morality sets forth a law, whereas condoms are simply an option. A consumption-oriented society will be interested in God only as a resource centre. Hence, most churches are antinomian, and they offer Jesus Christ as the great fire and life insurance agent. Such a person offers us protection. He does not command us as sovereign. But no such Jesus exists. Only He who is the blessed and only potentate, the King of kings, and Lord of lords. 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 15.